In this video, I'm talking about the one thing that all great photos have in common. And no, it's definitely not the rule of thirds. So, about 3 months ago, I started writing the script for my course on photography and composition. And since then, well, things have got a little bit out of hand. It's currently around 90,000 words long and is, without any doubt, the biggest project I've ever taken on, which definitely wasn't the plan. I honestly thought this would be easier. That being said, I'm really enjoying the process. I feel like I understand photography on a much deeper level than I ever did before this. In particular, the way photography overlaps with other topics, because it's easy to forget that the idea of categorization is an entirely artificial concept, right? Categories don't exist in nature. In nature, everything is connected, and so photography doesn't exist in isolation. It overlaps with many other areas: biology, psychology, geometry. And it's this crossover that brings me to a question that's been bouncing around in my head all week. What is it that makes a great photo? Well, great. Now, I know viewing art is a very personal affair, that we bring our own experiences, our own worldview to everything we look at, which is why the way you feel when admiring a photo will be different to the way I feel. But great art transcends these individual differences. It appeals to us despite our differences, and there's a lot of evidence that biology plays a part here, that great art triggers the release of specific hormones into our bloodstream. Imagine you're at a photography exhibition or on Instagram, that works as well, and you see an amazing travel photo. It just makes you happy. It motivates you to explore the world, pick up your camera, live your best life. I think we can all relate to this feeling, right? And it's because of this feeling that you're more likely to remember a photo like that. You see, we only commit visual scenes to our long-term memory when they're attached to an emotional reaction, which makes sense, right? You want to remember the moments that made you feel something, not the mundane, everyday ones. And that amazing travel photo released a cocktail of hormones directly into your system. That's why you felt happy. That's why you felt excited. That's also why you'll always have an emotional attachment to this, totally fictional photo I just made up. My point is this: a photo becomes great if it can provoke an emotional reaction. And that should be the goal of every photo you take. But how do you take a photo that will emotionally affect someone? Well, this is where psychology comes in, because when you look at a scene, that visual data is sent straight to your subconscious, which gets to process and also react to that data first. Your conscious mind has to wait its turn. And let's pause here for a second, as this is a pretty weird concept to wrap your head around. You're affected by a scene on a subconscious level before you know about it consciously, which, it essentially means your subconscious gets to decide if you're interested in something. Your conscious mind just gets to rationalize that interest. Let me give you a practical example here. Imagine you're in an art gallery and your eyes are drawn to this painting. It's Venus and Adonis by Rubens. You don't need to be familiar with the story being depicted, I wasn't, to work out that the male character is heading off on a journey and leaving his family behind. Take a look at the poses, the expressions, the attire, the props. Everything works together to recreate this narrative in your mind. This is storytelling. Just look at the details included by the artist to help you understand that the characters are on different paths. They're facing different directions, wearing different color clothes, even their skin tones are different. What's happening here though, this conscious processing of a scene, it will only typically happen because you were drawn to the painting by your subconscious. But what is it that attracted your subconscious to this image in the first place? Well, this is where geometry comes into the picture. And excuse the pun. The more you study the pose of the main characters, the more unnatural it starts to look. And that's because Rubens carefully posed these characters into a geometric shape, a triangle. It's hidden in plain sight, but once you see it, it's kind of hard to unsee it, right? And there's more to geometric composition than creating shapes within the scene. The painting itself is a rectangle, which means it has its own internal geometry. Just like the storytelling elements in a painting, the use of geometry here is also deliberate. You can see the composition is designed to echo this diagonal in the rectangle. It seems to move through Adonis's arm and then through the body of Venus. You may not have noticed this initially, but your subconscious totally did. And that's because our brains break complex scenes down into more simple shapes, as this speeds up processing times. That's why we're so sensitive to geometry. I actually cover this in way more detail in another video, so I'll link to it at the end. Understanding how biology, psychology, and geometry work together totally changed the way I plan and compose my photo shoots. I see it as a roadmap of sorts, a roadmap for creating great photos. Geometry is like a foot in the door. Then, once you have a viewer's attention, an understanding of psychology will help you connect emotionally with that viewer through storytelling. So how does all this work in practice? Well, stories still drive my concepts. In this series, the story was the loneliness of lockdown life. So I was relying on a very relatable story to drive emotional attachment. But I also made sure I included strong geometric elements, as I'm counting on that geometry to catch people's attention, to stand out in a gallery or be noticed on a social feed. The geometry in this photo is built around the main diagonal. The idea is it will hijack your attention, so you'll also notice the narrative details in the photo, relating with the insanity that comes with being stuck in lockdown, doing your nails even though you can't leave the house, basically following routines that make no sense anymore. And here's another photo from that same series. Again, the geometry is built around the diagonal, like the previous photo and just like the Rubens before that. All of this does not happen by accident, at least not very often. It's deliberate. I spent hours building up the composition of each photo in the series, so the location, the perspective, the pose, the lighting, they'd all work together. Geometry shouldn't take away from the narrative. It's the opposite, actually. Geometry helps prime a viewer's interest in the narrative composition, in the story. It increases the chances a viewer will react emotionally and remember your photo. It increases the chance you'll create a great photo. Thanks.